All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Can I get a motion, please, that the agenda for the June 18th, 2019 regular meeting of council be adopted with the addition of sundry item I-1, draft bylaw number 2232. Councillor Bevan will make that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor, motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, that the minutes of the May 21st, 2019 regular meeting of council be adopted as presented? Councillor Wilkinson will make that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor, motion carried. We have no public hearings, but we do have a delegation tonight, and I'd like to invite our delegation up to the table here. They're with the Living and Working Recovery Program to talk about their program. So if you just want to introduce yourselves.
Good evening, friends. Mayor Kevin, my name is Dwayne, and Dwayne Martin, and I'm an alcoholic. Does that work?
Feel free to have a seat.
Awesome, thank you so much. So it's no big surprise what we've been doing for the last couple of years, and what I've been doing personally in Edson or McMurray, anywhere else. We bring people from treatment centers and 12-step meetings and things like that on board with us to help them further succeed in life, to teach them the basic skills of having to go to work, laborers, whatever the positions might be, heavy equipment operators, doesn't matter. But it has come to my realization that given a clean and sober place to live and a clean and sober place to work, people then have a much greater success story and getting through the trials and tribulations of having to deal with life on life's terms without having to pick up a drink or a drug over it, those people with those issues. The reason why I'm coming to council today is because I would like some support. I know we're not looking for money. We are simply looking for an approval to proceed from town council. I'm here because our UCP delegate has asked me to get the permission or get the approval from town council to proceed with our projects, and then they will further support us in going forward to have these clean and sober environments built. When we talk about a clean and sober environment, we're talking about a complete complex of rental units, complete with a unity house, with a daycare center, with a common area, and all of the offices. We now have support from Alberta Health Services here in Zone 4 to proceed, and they will support us with whatever it is that we're going to need to make sure that these people get the assistance and the services required to be successful at their treatment. So basically what I've noticed is that, and through two years of steady investigating, the percentage is 98%. 98% of the people, after going to a treatment center, come back home to their same environment and they relapse. 98%. Because they don't have a clean and sober place to go. They don't have the supports necessary to keep going with their sobriety and their journey, to keep working it. Basically, I don't know if you can relate, but we are like a herd of sheep. And the second that one of us separates themselves from that herd, the wolves are on them. And that's where the relapse comes in, because you don't know until you don't. I would like your support, if I could, to continue with what I'm doing here in Edson. We have some properties. Martino and I talked last week as well. The zoning is R4, that's required for these builds. And there is some properties that we're looking at right now to build one of these in Edson. Lawyer Head Corporation is the larger component of all of it. Lawyer Industries is the working component, which is what we're working under right now. And Lawyer Living is a completely not-for-profit housing development that we've poked the bear, Mr. Jason Kenny, with, and they're very seriously looking at building these right across Alberta, because this is the missing link in every community. When your local people come back from a treatment center, they don't have a place to go. They don't have the supports to get to. When you leave a treatment center, you are then eligible for Lawyer Living or even a detox center, pending if this is your first or second term. We will assess those needs as they come in. Yes, there's meetings, there's 12-step meetings on all properties every night of the week. Also, you also get a job. the contractors who will be getting the builds, Mint Homes has stepped up to be a massive player in this area. Nothing is guaranteed yet, but Dale has been a big supporter of mine and what I'm doing for the longest time. So is his brother, and their whole family are amazing. But they've been in this community for decades and decades, and they want to see what's best for their people. So basically, what I'm here doing right now is asking for your permission and your approvals to keep going forward with the clean and sober living environment in the Edson town. We also have a Yellowhead County meeting as well. So we'd like to have one establishment in the county, one establishment in Edson, and Thursday night we have the same board meeting in Hinton too as well. So we just like to ask for your permission to keep going forward, and that you would support us for whatever means you can. I understand it is what it is. We might have to come looking for some land. We might have to come looking for some services of some sort, but I do understand money is tight, and I get it. I totally get it. But the process is that we're trying to take the Edson people and clean them up. Basically, a lot of them have already, I opened my shop last winter for the homeless. Privately, I did that. And a lot of them had already been to treatment centers. Probably 95% of them had already been to treatment centers, but when they came back out of the treatment center, they didn't have a clean and sober place to go. They went right back to the same environment they just came from, where the same things happened. So there are some stipulations to the clean and sober living. This is a, once again, completely clean and sober. It will be managed up with an on-site manager. All of the contractors have to offer apprenticeship programs to the youth coming out of the treatment centers in carpentry, electrical, plumbing, concrete finishing, anything to do with the builds. The contractors have to be able to offer apprenticeship programs to our young Edsonites to give them trades and give them opportunities to go forward.
All right, and that concludes your presentation.
I think that's it, Kevin.
All right, well, thank you very much, Dwayne. We appreciate your passion on this issue, and certainly an area that are, well, please stay seated. We'll have some questions for you.
Here we go. Sorry.
So we'll open the floor to questions. It'll be very clear we're not making any decisions tonight. We will take your presentation under advisement, and then council make a decision in a future meeting. So we have Councillor Bevan and then Councillor Chenard.
Through the chair, thank you, Mr. Morton, for your presentation. It's some facts we obviously didn't know about in that. My question is, how many units are you planning on building?
Every complex is built on a needs assessment. This one will be approximately 8 3-bedrooms, 8 2-bedrooms, and 12 independent 1-bedroom suites, along with the Unity House. That Unity House will consist of, like I said, a small daycare center, also 3 or 4 offices for Alberta Health Services or any other counseling entities that want to lease those facilities and have those supports on site.
Thank you.
All right, Councillor Chenard.
Yeah, thanks, Dwayne, for your presentation. Even though I'm in favor, I like the concept, but I'm not understanding why you need the approval of council. I mean, like, the thing is, like...
Truthfully, I totally understand what you're saying, and I didn't think I'd have to jump through this hoop either, but our MLA is saying, you get Edson and Hinton and Yellowhead County on board, and I'm gonna push this right to Jason Kenney, and we're gonna get it. So, I'm doing what I was told to do.
Fair enough answer.
Okay.
Thank you, and that'll be something we'll discuss with our MLA. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, when you're talking about building new. Now, on the west end of Edmonton, isn't there a place, My Home or My House or something? Which
Our
is
house.
like our house, a one-year treatment center in a former motel?
Yes.
Do you ever think of repurposing any building in town?
We looked at that. We looked at that hard, especially because when it comes to numbers, we're looking at about $4 million build to potentially a $1 million buy and a rental. We looked at that. As far as I'm concerned, the areas that are they're too close to downtown,
Okay.
too close to liquor stores,
Yeah.
too close to, and bottom line, these people are after a fresh start. So let's give them a fresh start. Let's give them, if they want to be products of members of society, let's give them society. Being those apartment buildings downtown, we did approach a few people on the sale and things like that, but again, there's a liquor store, there's 7-Eleven, everything is right downtown, and that's a hot spot for us. So
Okay.
the further away, like the county and things like that, same thing.
I understand that.
Yeah,
And
okay.
again, to the Anderson family, it's so wonderful that they are helping you out. They are
Well,
just
they're
really
kicking my
pillars
ass.
in the community. They really
Yeah,
are.
yeah.
Yeah, and I appreciate
Yeah.
them.
Okay. Councillor Curry.
So, thank you. So do you have a place in town that you're thinking? Like,
There's a couple of
specific-
properties, Martino and I talked last week, there's a property that's privately owned, that's beside the hospital. I did talk to Crystal Brown about that today, who is the top chief of Zone 4 for Alberta Health Services. We looked at that. We looked in Hillendale, there's also some R4 stuff. Anderson's did offer up the 7 acres on 63rd Street with the little white house on it, which is the north side of the pipeline. And that price is incredibly reasonable. What they're willing to sell that to me for is incredibly reasonable, and it comes with the house already. Whether we get approval to build there or not is gonna be up to the neighbors, I think. I'm not sure how that's gonna work.
Thank you.
More questions?
Any other questions? Councillor Sorensen.
Thank you, Dwayne, for excellent presentation. Coming from an alcoholic family, as a kid I went to AA meetings and I went to treatment centers. I know how important this is in our community, and you have my full support bearing any development permit process. We have to go through
Beautiful.
that process, but you have my full support. Thank
Right
you.
on, Troy. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Councillor Barr.
Through the chair to Mr. Martin, thanks for the presentation. This is something that has been lacking in our community and at every community, as you mentioned. And as Councillor Sorensen suggested, I don't have any questions, but I am in support of this initiative as it stands, asking for our support right now without any financial bearing on it yet.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thank you.
No, I appreciate that. Thanks, guys. The one difference, sorry, I didn't mention, the one difference, a lot of the treatment centers and things like that, this is not a treatment center. That's why the partnership with Alberta Health Services was so important, and once we got that confirmation last week, the weight was lifted off my shoulders. But this is a program and a healthy living choice for the children as well. When the children come to live in this environment, we're breaking the cycle of addiction in the children, because the alcohol and drug abuse that goes on in home is not normal anymore. They're not going to grow up knowing that that's normal. So that's why it's so important to me to make sure that the children are raised in this, and the children are already a part of the destruction that mom and dad and or whomever has already endured through the addiction process or the alcoholism process. The children are already a product. When we take the children away from the parents, you're giving the parents no hope. Basically, you might as well, this is why we want it to be a completely family-friendly atmosphere with all of the support groups in place. We also have a letter from the Friendship Center giving us their full support on any parenting services required, because it is so important that we teach our parents how to parent. Because I'm guilty, I get it, I totally understand, and I was that guy many, many years ago. So I'm very grateful to have this opportunity to give back.
All right, Councillor
Gene.
Schneid.
Actually, the reason I'm bringing this question up, because we're always referring to homelessness in Edson, so probably a pretty high percentage of these people that you're talking about probably fit in that homeless. So the center you're building, would there be a placement for the homeless?
We just
people
talked
there?
about that this afternoon as well, and that was one of Alberta Health Services' main, that and the needle exchange program. I'll tell you rigorously honest, this is what their concerns are. We can and we will implement a MAT program. It will be not visible to the daycare. It will be, the MAT program in Fort McMurray stands that you have to be there by 8 o'clock at night, you have to be clean and sober, and you have to leave by 8 o'clock in the morning. Now, during my experience with the homelessness here in town, like I said, I did open my commercial building up at the time for the cold when it was minus 40, and I had about anywhere between 20 and 25, 30 people there. They all had places to go, except when they were high, or except when they were using. Some people just like to be homeless. We've already crossed that bridge too. It is what it is. The key to this is this. After the treatment center or after the detox, I deal with people on a daily basis, every day, that are ready and willing to go to work, ready and willing to give it a shot. after they've crossed that bridge. So it's not my job to take them to the point of saying, you know what, I've had enough. You know what, it's time to change. When they get to that point, and when they're at the treatment center, and when they're at the detox center, they've already made that decision that they need help. And this is the missing link in every community across Canada. And so that's what we've set this up for. This nonprofit charity is set up to go right across Canada. There is nothing like this in Canada. We need to make sure, I'm just your average Joe, except my name's Dwayne, but this is the missing link. So that's what I'm pushing for. And I'm taking every ounce of support and every ounce of education and knowledge with me, because I can't do it myself. I know that. I've already accepted that.
All right, any other questions from council? Once again, thank you for your presentation, and I love your passion. We've talked about this a couple times,
Thanks,
you and
Kevin. I
I.
appreciate it.
Certainly something that's near and dear to my heart. Much like Councillor Sorensen, I have some experience with addictions with my family and friends, and you're absolutely correct. There is a system that's not very efficient. We waste, I think, a lot of money and get people's hopes up when the stages in the process don't work. When you're kicked out onto the street after you finish detox and treatment, and you have no place to go, and that's certainly a missing link in many communities, and certainly something that I generally support the concept. Just a matter, I know there's going to be a lot of government regulations and loopholes you'll have to get through in order to make this happen, but certainly something that I think is definitely needed in our community. So thank you for your presentation.
Thanks, guys. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Can I get a motion, please, that council give second reading to council procedural bylaw number 2230? Councillor Curry will make that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Councillor Wilkinson.
On page 25 there, 12.6 on my 25, it says, unless permitted by the chair, a member may only speak twice on any motion. Why do we have that included? Like sometimes other information comes up and you want to add something else?
Sorry, what page is that?
Well, it's mine, 25 of 38,
Section
12.6.
12.6. Unless permitted by chair, any member may only speak twice on any
I
motion.
know we've been practicing that, and it sort of always surprised me, or why, you know?
I think the idea behind that is that in order to ensure that agenda items continue to move forward, we're not repeating same information and same questions. So that's why there is that clause in there, unless permitted by chair. So if new information or something new, that often what we say is, do you have something new to add?
Yeah, because it
And
is
then,
new.
yeah, and it's new, and then you're permitted by the chair to continue on with your line of questioning or your comments. I think that is why, as well as not to ensure every member of council has the opportunity to ask questions and be involved in that process, and not have one member or two members of council kind of controlling that.
We just never had that before.
I believe it was in there before.
Oh, we've never practiced then, like.
It wasn't. There's a number of things that were in the procedural bylaw.
New information, and then we had to.
Yeah. So there's a number of things in the old procedural bylaw that have not been followed, which should be followed, and that's included in here.
Thank you, thank you, and I agree with what you've said, Mayor. I would just add that the kind of historical underpinnings of this, going all the way back to Robert's Rules of Order, is to prevent, in the American system, you've probably heard the term filibustering, where someone can just get up and speak all night, or hold up processes based on procedure. And this is to limit those types of things going forward. And I certainly think with the discretion of the chair being available there, that any reasonable interest in speaking would be recognized by the chair.
Okay, I'm in another fraternal group, and we definitely follow Robert's Rules of Order, and definitely don't have this in there.
Councillor Chenard.
Actually going to 12.3, code of, or conduct of members, no member shall engage or use of social media. If I'm not mistaken, during council meetings, we're not allowed to use any electronic devices, and we did alter it when we started using iPads. So I was just curious why we just highlighted social media. You're not allowed to phone, text, or anything during a council meeting. So I'm just wondering why that got pinpointed.
Yeah, I think the social media, obviously we don't want people tweeting or Facebooking while in a meeting, but you're absolutely right. There should not be any phone calls or texting. So maybe we need to clarify the language in that. Or is it located someplace else in that
I tried
that
finding it
document?
and I couldn't.
Thank you, Kayla. I'm not sure that it's specifically identified in terms of cell phone usage there. I think the main concern was more of social media engagement. We'd also have to check the code of conduct policy may more specifically identify that as well. But
Okay.
On another
Oh,
point.
hang on.
Oh, sorry.
Anybody else have any other questions? Okay, Councillor
Sorry,
Wilkinson.
okay, on another point, 13.21, about a motion voted on by council. I asked again, parliamentarian about this, especially if a motion is being made. And I asked, can it be changed? Can you reconsider the previous motion that was passed? And he said, yes, you can. If nothing's been done since that motion happened, and there isn't an excess of time, you can withdraw it.
And sorry, what clause was that again? 13.
But I think 13.21 is where they're talking about a motion voted on by council. I thought maybe it fit in there, that you could withdraw a motion if no action has been taken on it. I think we had an instance of that, and I just thought it gives us a chance to withdraw if we wish.
Administration, you have any comments on that?
perhaps if I may to just seek a little clarification from the council member there. You're suggesting that in the instance of council passing a motion at one meeting and 2 weeks later being interested in rescinding a motion, is that?
Withdrawing the motion if no action has been taken on that motion, and it can be done.
Just a comment or a question. Couldn't there just be a new motion saying that that motion is withdrawn?
I don't know, that's what I just wondered here, like, it didn't sort of include it in this 13.21.
I think, thank you, Mayor. I think typically we would deal with that as a motion to rescind as an individual motion. And I would only just sometimes the ramifications are beyond even the procedural bylaw. For example, if there's a legal or contractual obligations or planning or other procedures or regulations that may impact that reality as well. I guess what I'm trying to say is what the lawyers often say. I think it depends on the type of motion and the type of circumstance. So I think it's hard to specify something quite as broad as that in that
Our
terms.
parliamentarian just said if no action was taken on it, then it can be withdrawn.
Okay. Councillor Sorensen.
Just to that point, if someone wants to rescind a motion, can't they just do a new notice of motion saying they would like to?
They should be able to.
Then we have that procedure already.
Okay.
Yep. Councillor Curry.
This is already in here. 13.22, Section C. A council may introduce a motion asking to reconsider a matter that was dealt with in a previous motion, providing number C, the motion to which it is to apply has not already been acted upon. It's covered right underneath there.
Okay, we were very much in doubt about this, about a motion we made, and that's why I'm just really trying to clarify
But our
this.
motion had legal ramifications, is why we can't do it. There's a difference if it has legal.
Yes.
Really, when we haven't acted on it, it's still legal then? And
Yeah.
that's just unquestioned?
Yeah, because that's a land matter.
Okay.
Yes, if I may, I think the clarification there is sometimes the motion passing itself is the action required, if that makes sense. If you're issuing approval, for example, the motion itself is the action, and so an action has taken place on that item.
Okay, I don't know, I spoke about this particular thing. The parliamentarian didn't feel that way, but whatever.
Councillor Schiller.
I just wanted clarification, like in 13.1, a member shall not speak to the matter until a motion has been moved on the floor. But despite section 1, member may ask administration, so before a motion's made, just so I'm clear on this, I may question the motion, meaning that prior to speaking on it, I may want clarification on what exactly the motion is. So that is allowed, if I'm reading that correctly?
Yes.
Okay, because I was a little confused. You can't speak on it, so I can't speak to or for, but I can ask for clarification. prior.
What the intent
Okay.
behind it?
I read it and I was a little confused on it, but thank you for clarification.
Okay, any other questions, comments, or concerns? All right, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. And can I get a motion, please, that council give third reading to bylaw number 2230? Councilor Chouinard will make that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. Can I get a motion, please, from our current Deputy Mayor, that Councillor Wilkinson be appointed as Deputy Mayor commencing July 1st, 2019 and expiring the first day of November 2019. Thank you, Deputy Mayor Sorensen. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none. All those in favor? Motion carried. Congratulations,
Thank you.
Councillor
I'll be
Wilkinson.
nice, but if you're absent, I would vote against.
Can I get a motion, please, that council appoint Carrie Florizone, Lisa Jenresic, and Martino Verhage as development officers for the town of Edson in accordance with Section 9 of the Land Use Bylaw 2070. Councillor Byer will make that motion, and we have Mr. Verhage here to brief us on this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of council. This is just essentially technicality under our land use bylaw, which is outlined in the Part 17 of the Municipal Government Act. Essentially, there's a development authority which is designated under our land use bylaw, which also outlines that we have several staff that have the authority to act as development authority or as the development officer, having certain duties under that bylaw. Typically, and likely within a forthcoming bylaw change in the future, we would simply state that the CAO would send a letter designating the development officers under there. However, our current land use bylaw goes back to the olden days where typically council would directly appoint those individuals. And so with some staff changes, we felt it was appropriate for us to have that put into place so that we're ensuring that there's no discrepancies with regards to the authority of your planning staff.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Chouinard.
I don't mind the idea of having three, but is this something new? Because I thought before we had one development officer and then the others would be their assistants. So I'm not against it, but I just want clarification. Is this something new or is this common practice?
Go ahead, Mr. Verhage.
And Mr. Chairman, through Councillor Chouinard, we do only have one development officer. However, Carrie is the manager, so you should be able to travel authority and responsibility upward throughout the ranks. So Carrie should have the authority to also enact things such as orders and other development approvals. And then as the general manager, who's also a registered professional planner, it makes sense for me to also have that authority. Ultimately, the CAO always retains the authority to approve anything as the development authority within a municipality as well. So.
All right,
If I may just add to that, it's similar to how Al Schramm, who's the manager, director of protective services, he's also designated as a bylaw officer so that he can perform those functions and support it as necessary. It's a similar dynamic to that, even though he's not in the position of that name.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I don't notice Anne Deschambault's name on here. Is she already appointed development authority? So that wouldn't be a new appointment then. She would still retain.
Go ahead, Mr. Verhage.
Mr. Chairman, historically, Anne did have that appointment, is my understanding. However, she's also transitioning out of that role, so in recognition of her changing role and the depth in the bench we now have in that portfolio, didn't feel the need to put her name forward again. So.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Bevan.
Yeah, just to the chair, just looking at this, is there any reason why we need three people when we have nothing moving in town, no lots being sold, not a lot of development coming in, we haven't grown or anything at all? I mean, you know, we seem to be hiring more and more, you know, getting top heavy here. And I just, people ask me this question all the time and I don't have an answer. I mean, if we had somebody knocking on our door, build a West End sewer line out there and everything else and stuff like that, knocking on our door to build, you know, whatever here, I can see, but nothing is moving for us here.
Mr. Verhage.
Mr. Chairman, through to Councillor Bevan, I suppose the question for council would be is if someone comes in and two of my planning manager and my development officer happen to be on vacation, do you want me to have the authority to issue approvals and to manage those issues or not? This essentially allows us to have depth on the bench and create that flexibility for our development interests.
And to be clear, these positions are replacing existing positions within development. There's been no additional positions created. Just that these individuals will have the authority to actually carry out the duties as described. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, when you say you're going to have these people able to issue these things, now just this week I was hearing mistakes were made, and then the person has to correct those mistakes. So I guess if you're having people do this and they make a mistake, who pays for it? Are we, the town, going to pay the people for the difference in money on their bill? Or is it that stuck to the builder to have to pay that difference after our department has made the mistake?
Mr. Chairman, through to Councillor Wilkinson, I would encourage you to share the details of that with the CAO, but I have no knowledge of what you're speaking to.
I have, and I will more. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carried. No information items. Moving on to sundry items. Can I get a motion, please, that council give first reading to bylaw number 2232, amending land use bylaw number 2070 by removing section 77 being site standards for places of worship, and set a public hearing for bylaw number 2232 for Tuesday, July 9th, 2019 at the regularly scheduled council meeting for the town of Edson. Councillor Chouinard will make that motion, and CEO Duricott, if you want to.
Perhaps I'll speak to that first, Mr. Chair, and then Martino can certainly add to that. On occasion, we are presented with situations which cause us to review our policies and our procedures, in this case the land use bylaw, and when we encounter a standard or an item that we feel may be antiquated or no longer serving a purpose, it becomes us to bring it forward to council for consideration for removal. We've encountered that situation, and that is why this is before council at this time. It is certainly our intention to engage in the near future in a general review of our land use bylaw, but that process can take 6 months to a year, and so we feel it is worthwhile to consider this specific instance, as there is an individual interested in moving forward with the project, and this is currently a barrier to them moving forward. However, it's not an individual circumstance. This is a situation where we feel the standard is not one we would apply in any circumstance, and so we are asking for council's consideration. I'd ask for Martino to add any more specific clarity or context for the standard here. So,
Mr. Verhage, you have anything new to add?
Thank you. The only addition I would make is just the recognition that places of worship are considered to be quasi-public uses, which are allowed in a variety of districts listed within the report. The only place where it's a permitted use, meaning that it must be granted rather than a discretionary use, is the community services district, which there would be no concern in the location of such a use in that designation by council. In the other places, such as retail service areas or residential areas in Glenwood, for example, where a standard like this might, if it's removed, allow for smaller lots to have the location of these types of facilities. It's discretionary, and so there's a process by which they can be examined on a site-by-site basis. The issue with the standard as it stands right now is that it may preference larger denominations, which may not be in keeping with the intentions of the town of Edson. It's also a standard which has been in the town of Edson's bylaw for tens of years, but has not been applied for more than a decade. And therefore, we'd consider it to be kind of antiquated and appropriate for removal.
All right, thank you. All open the floor to questions. Councillor Chouinard.
Okay, I'm pleased that we're bringing this forward. So if an individual, until this is passed and changed, would we bring them any kind of consideration, someone applying? Because where we're changing this, and we're kind of aware of the, why, and I totally agree, because the bylaw is so old. So someone wanting to apply prior, because if we do the public hearing on the 9th, it'll probably take, 2 months or so before we can change it, or how fast can we change it?
Go ahead, Mr. Verhage.
Mr. Chairman, if council provides first reading today, then we would move to advertise immediately, which would allow us for our 2 clear weeks before the public hearing. Once the public hearing is concluded, you would be able to pass second and third reading that July 9th, of making it effective that night. With regards to application, as this is actually a development standard, not a use, there's no direct prohibition created by the standard. that creates complications with regards to variances and other issues. However, once it's been removed, we'd be able to proceed with an approval essentially the next day once that bylaw is in place.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Sorensen and then Councillor Byer.
Forgive me, I don't understand the, how does someone declare that they are their place of worship? Do they need provincial approval, or so can someone declare their house a place of worship?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, through to Councillor Sorensen, although the requirements can be quite varied for a variety of uses, places of worship, liquor stores, cannabis stores, they might have various approvals and other issues to go through. From a municipal land use development perspective, all they require is the approval of council through a district for the use, and then of course the issuance of a permit in accordance with the bylaw. So for our purposes, to allow them to proceed with the activity on the site, that would simply be the land use development permit. With regards to actually being declared a church and going through that variety of other issues and benefits that might come with that, that would be a separate process outside of our control.
Can I have a follow-up?
Sure, go ahead.
Having them designated as a place of worship, does that affect any of our taxation on them or our bylaws on that specific parcel?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, through to Councillor Sorensen, I understand there are differences in how taxation occurs with places of worship, or rather churches, but that would be more related to, I believe, their status as a church versus our designation of their site as being allowed for a place of worship. If they were not considered to be a church, that would be a different issue.
Yeah, I think I would add to that, and please, Martino, if you feel this is inaccurate, to correct me. Being a location being designated as a place of worship for land use bylaw does not automatically exempt them from taxation. Those are separate designations and separate processes, and so aren't necessarily the same. You could have a group, people worship all kinds of ways and in all kinds of manners these days, and so for the land use purpose, we're more interested in the type of activities that the meetings, the size of congregation, the parking requirements, the effect it may have on adjacent landowners, rather than the religious implications or charitable status of the organization.
All right, thank you. Councillor Byer.
Through the chair to Mr. Verhage, Councillor Sorensen asked one of my questions, and my other one was, so it says in 77.1, the development, so it's at the discretion of the development authority, and in the memo it mentions whose congregation may be small. What do we define as small? Like if they were to say we only have 10 people, and then in a year now they have 100, how do we, like if they were to increase their congregation by a lot, like how would that affect the parking and everything else, right? Like if they're small, what is small, and when would that small change to a different like something else within the development authority?
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, through to Councillor Byer, one of the things we would have liked to have done, and given more time to review the issue, we would have looked at actually creating a large and small congregation subset within here for parameters. However, there was a need to ensure that we're not impacting certain desired users within the town to establish a place of worship. So we didn't really have the time to go through the full vetting of that. If we were to create a larger and smaller denomination grouping and then actually have standards varied based on that, that would probably be something I would not recommend we do until we've had stakeholder input, reviewed it with different congregations within the town, and gotten a good feel for where we are applying for the appropriate level or standard of regulation. At this time, our thought was that being an impediment at this stage in this way was not in the greater interest, and so we're proceeding with looking at just simply removing those standards at this time. Dealing with the large versus small congregation is a hurdle we would probably deal with in the future. It might not even be necessary to differentiate that. Things like parking, for example, are usually based on size or so on, so we would be able to deal with that on an individual application basis.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, I'd just like to say thank you very much for trying to facilitate this so it actually works for the person. That's very nice. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get, well, we're moving on to council committee reports and FCM conference reports, and we will start with Councillor Byer.
Okay, so on, I went to FCM. I don't remember what the dates were, but I'm sure Kayla knows those. So I went to one of the library tours, and it was previously in one of their 400-year-old churches, which was really interesting to see how they repurposed that building, as they have many churches that they need to repurpose, and they turned it into a very lovely library. And some of the things all the libraries within the city of Quebec, they managed to increase their hours by 360 hours per week without increasing their budget. So they reduced their services for certain hours. So if they were normally open like 10 to 5, they would open up at 8, but not have as many services available. And they found out that the patrons attending during that time were just grabbing a book that they'd ordered or something, right? They weren't needing those extra services. So they kind of found some really unique ways to increase the hours they're open, and they said it did not affect their budget at all. So something really interesting that maybe we can take back and see if that's a need as we develop a plan of service for the Edson Library as well. So and then some other ideas they had about decreasing their book size, the collection they have, but they increased their lending by 20%, so they got rid of titles that weren't as desirable, and then they started placing them on the shelf like this so people could see the covers instead of shoved in where it's harder to see. So they found out that more patrons would take out books when they saw them on the shelf like this instead of shoved in to the into the shelf there. So sorry, I lost my page now. And then something else on one of the sessions that came to mind was September 25th is Tree Day. I didn't know if there's any way that the town can collaborate with Weyerhaeuser to do something to promote trees, or if Weyerhaeuser already has something that we can piggyback off of and help out that. It was an interesting thing they had. Councillor Wilkinson and I talked to another councillor from Strathcona County, and luckily we don't have to go this direction, but if there was if the vote today by the federal government was that they didn't want to pass this, then we were going to collaborate to work to do an emergency AUMA resolution if the federal government has passed that. So we had a really good conversation with a councillor from Strathcona County about other ways that we can help promote it at the different levels of government. So that's my takebacks from that. June 10th, I had a youth council meeting. They mainly were preparing for the council presentation that they had last week and looking at some different leadership style training events for the group. And we also had a tour of the youth shack, so it's still in very much construction stage, and they were able to give some input on different styles and things that they felt would suit the youth more so than instead of having the community services department pick the colors and things like that, right? So they kind of had some input on what they felt was nice. And then yesterday, June 17th, I had a YRL board meeting in Spruce Grove for the libraries, and they did a lot of discussion on advocacy. So they stopped advocating to the provincial government in 2009. I don't know why, and they decided last year that they needed to kind of, maybe we were lacking on some things, and this was a method to do it. So they had a really, really big push on how to advocate and to do it positively and not no shutdowns or anything, and just how to advocate to on different levels, right, to our local government, and then as well as just to all your patrons and everybody else as well. So it was really good. I'll speak to more about that tomorrow at my meeting tomorrow.
All right, Councillor Sorensen.
All right, on May 23rd, I went to the EDRS Edson District Recycling Society AGM. They presented their first audit. They passed, so and they thought it was a great process to go through. They learned a lot about themselves and their strengths and weaknesses. One of the alarming things for me, anyways, that was mentioned was that they will be forecasting zero revenue from cardboard from next year for 2020. So that is one of their biggest sources of revenue right now, and if they're forecasting $0 of revenue from it, that's a major impact on their budget and as a consequence our budget. May 30th to June 2nd I went to FCM. I also went to the same library tour that Councillor Bayer went to. It was a it was a really interesting tour. One of the key messages I heard was that they put book storage and book display as a secondary priority in all of their thinking. Their thinking is maximizing use of the space, maximizing services to the community, and book storage and book display is a secondary thought to that process. So that was quite interesting. I also went on a tour of the NHL size stadium. It was a fantastic tour, seeing the inner workings, seeing how they were able to do this almost $300 million project under budget and on time. So fantastic learning experience for me. June 6th, I went to the AUMA Leaders Caucus on behalf of the mayor. And that was very interesting for me, hearing what other municipalities around the province are worrying about, and there was a lot of discussion on how to deal with the new provincial government. One of the key take-home messages I got was over the last 4 years, you might have sent direct messages to ministers asking for support on a particular issue, and now they believe you should be sending that directly to the MLA. MLA is your direct link to the provincial government for most issues. June 10th, also went to the Youth Shack tour. Like Councillor Bear mentioned, the youth councillors have decided on an industrial look for the interior of the shack. Then they thought that colorful art can evolve and change over the years within the place, but having a kind of a neutral background is the way to go, and I couldn't agree more. June 11th had a committee of the whole meeting. June 18th, today, we had another Edson District Recycling meeting, working out the drafts on their service and lease agreements. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
All right, I'll start off. On the 25th, I had the AGM for the Athabasca Watershed in Hinton, FCM from May 30th to June 2nd. On June 12th, the Evergreen Foundation had a site meeting, then an open house. And thank you for coming, the media, and the seniors were really happy to see it. I really appreciated that. June 13th, I had a full day strategic planning for Evergreen Foundation. And last night we had coffee with council. It was overcrowded.
Literally coffee with
With FCM report, I definitely enjoyed listening to the four leaders of the national parties. I think that's always a highlight for me, and hearing them. I went on a study tour for energy recovery and the environment, the Quebec City's biomethanation plant. And really what it is, they just take the straight garbage, it pours in, they have a great big forklift that can take 5 tons, and they take it and they burn it. And excuse me, from that burn, the steam is used at a pulp mill. But I was actually quite surprised that they were still working like that. And then we went to a different plant where they talked about their wastewater treatment plant, and it seemed one of their main things was to pump it out in the middle of the river because it was a big river, which just rather shocked me. And the other one I went to was assistance for people in vulnerable or crisis situations and cooperation between the police and the frontline workers. And it actually was for a larger city than what we have here, unfortunately. There's still things we could work at, and you must do it on Citizens on Patrol. But this actually was more on the level of a city. I didn't realize that. We had elections, and this Darren Hill won for 3rd Vice President, so we'll be seeing him as he practices his French, I'm sure, to be a president of FCM. And I really enjoyed the trade fair there. They showed an electronic voting machine, which I thought was pretty neat. You could just put your vote in, the way it goes. And I guess that's when technology works. It would just be wonderful. They also was a place there with medals for volunteers, that you can get medals for different occasions. I guess that's something we could discuss at strategic planning if we wanted to or not. Just sovereign medals for volunteers. So I have a booklet about it, but it's quite interesting. And again, that Tree Canada for having conjunction with our forest industry would be great. So thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bevan.
Nothing to report.
All right. Councillor Curry.
All right, on May 23rd, I had the Historical Society AGM, and then just our regular meeting. And I had sent out an update, but just some highlights I think everybody should be aware of. They just in the summer months, or so, sorry, May, June, July, August, September, they had over 11,000 visitors last year. And just so everyone knows, they don't use a counter. That is actually head counting, and so it's actually underinflated because they purposely don't want to inflate it. So they're very careful about that, which I thought was pretty crazy. They also had 206 rentals of the facility last year. So it is busy, which is fantastic. And they're realizing that they maybe need to look at their capacity and slow down a little bit. As a board, we're telling them to slow down a little bit because they are just going like crazy. Things to remember, Wat May. Everybody keeps September long weekend open. Wat May, there's events Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night. It'll be a lot of fun. So all September long weekend, stay in town. And then on May 29th to June 4th, I also was at FCM. Couple of highlights, kind of things that I took away. Went on a tour about the Dutch elm disease. And what I thought was really interesting, and it's not in all of Quebec, but for Quebec City and surrounding area, they have students that check your trees, and if there is Dutch elm in your trees, you are responsible for removing it, and it is mandatory that you remove it, which I just thought was interesting because as ours spread onto private land, with our spruce beetle and all that issue, how that works, and a part of it was that they're making owners take responsibility for it too. Other kind of big thing, this was not at the conference, but just because of the way our town is set up, I thought it was really interesting that in Quebec, all of their pedestrian lights are four-way, so it stops all traffic in all directions and you can go either way. And I just thought it would be really interesting and you guys, so it only stops traffic one time. I thought it'd be really interesting just with the one-way and us fighting for wanting new lights and such, and knowing we have our summer festival and such at downtown. I just thought it would be an interesting thing to see how much that actually stops, how often you have to change the lights and with pedestrians that. Just a more effective way and to make it more pedestrian friendly. And then I also, like Councillor Wilkinson, thought the four federal leaders were really fascinating to listen to. And kind of my big takeaway quote of the entire thing was that we can do everything as long as we're not worried about who gets credit for it. And I thought it was a very, very good message to all elected officials. And then I had the chamber on June 12th. And just kind of some dates to be aware of. Summer Festival is July 10th, 11th, and 12th. And then just a change in kind of the norm. They usually have their business gala the second October, the second Friday in October, but they had to change it to October 19th. Because there might be a federal election on the 9th, the day that it's supposed to be, so they had to change that date because the Legion is busy. And then today I had also the meeting with the Edson District Recycling Society. That's it.
All right, thank you. Councillor Chouinard.
I was busy, but I can't report, but I'll report on things I'm allowed to. On June 10th, all the tree talk, and we might well do it, weather permitting, and it's sometime in August, they will plant their 300 millionth tree that they planted in the area, so 300 million.
Who will?
What's that?
Who will?
West Fraser.
Oh, West Fraser.
Yes, because they didn't specify a name because of all the name changes, so it's 300 million. The other thing that was interesting with the hot and cold, in January, it halted their trees coming in because it was so warm. The government was shutting them down because they were making ruts in the road, shutting down. But with February being cold, then the question was on pine beetle. And pine beetle, they need to hit 97% kill. They hit 92%. So they know it will definitely affect, but if they hit 97, so now they're gonna wait and see. But that cold February, when we had that 3 weeks, played havoc with the pine beetle. The other thing they announced, and I won't say, some provinces right now are in serious trouble in the lumber industry because where it was a high, it's slipping. Fortunately for us, Hinton Edson are still the #1 mills, so that's important because it employs a lot of people, but it is sliding. The Edson mill, they're trying with the weird roads, they are running out of wood. So they're trying to run their trucks double shifting when possible, but the hot and cold has made a real challenge for them. They've been monitoring safety and they've been reporting it, so there was a lot of alarming going, oh my God, our safety thing, but they're starting to report everything. So a lot of this stuff was virtually driving, because driving is the most important thing with log trucks and stuff. So overall, it was a shocking report, but when you look at it, I sent everyone a copy of the agenda with the amount of hours driven. When you look at the infractions, it's still a very low percentage. And I think that's it for that. I'll send you guys that. And then I had the committee of the whole meeting on the 11th. Unfortunately, the Trans-Canada meeting came up June 7th, and when I do get the highlights of the meeting, I could not attend it because I had other things to do, but when I get the highlights, I'll pass it on to you from there. So that's it for my report.
All right, thank you. May 29th to June 2nd, FCM toured the Videotron Center with Councillor Wilkinson. That was a very interesting tour.
Sorensen. Sorry.
Sorensen,
I'd
sorry.
like to have gone.
It was interesting to see. We put on a lot of steps in that facility, but a lot of good information there. Also did the presentation that Councillor Wilkinson did as well with the coordinated response to dealing with homelessness and vulnerable populations. Was a really interesting approach. I agree it's much for a larger city, but they were finding that their policing services were dealing with the same individuals over and over again. They would get tickets for, say, breaking curfew, but they're homeless. So where are they supposed to go? So they keep getting curfew tickets. Can't pay them, don't have a job, don't have any ways to deal with that. So they came up with a coordinated approach in which they team up with a social worker. Police have a contract with a social services agency. They have a amount of time to respond to that incident. I think it's 30 minutes or so. And the police actually hand over that person to the social services agency to deal with, to see if they can come up with an approach in order to get them housed and get them back on their feet. They shared a story of an individual who went through the process, had a whole bunch of charges against him, appeared before the judge. The judge stayed the proceedings to see if this individual would kind of get back on their feet. He was able to do so. He completed the program within a year, and the judge at the end of it presented, first of all the charges got removed, and then the judge actually presented this individual with what looked like a diploma or a certificate of completion. This individual never graduated high school, and it was a really moving moment for him, and he is now a contributing member of society. But when this process first started, he didn't want any help, didn't want to deal with anything. He was pretty jaded by his life so far, and he was a pretty young man. So it just goes to show if you have agencies working together with those wraparound services, you can actually make a difference in a community. It's not going to work for everybody, but certainly they're seeing some success in Quebec City. Interesting doing the walking tours of Quebec City too. Virtually no crime in the city, and very clean, beautiful place. So really good conference. Alberta had the most delegates there than any other province, supporting Canadian energy, and was interesting conversations with people about pipelines and energy development right across this country. On June 10th, I had the Edson Community Health Partnership meeting, and I've already sent council a briefing note on that. On June 10th, also had a Youth Council, Committee of the Whole on June 11th, and the EDRS negotiating committee meeting today, and that is my report. We have no financial items.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes,
Sorry,
go ahead.
You just have a...
Oh, sorry, Councillor Beyer.
Through the mayor, I just had a couple questions on
Sure.
some of the community reports. To Councillor Sorensen, so why is there only 0% cardboard revenue for 2020? Is the current market suggesting that it's decreasing that significantly?
Yeah, the prices are going down, and they're not to zero yet, but she's predicting by January it'll be down to zero.
Okay. And then another one to Councillor Wilkinson. So in Quebec City, they're burning their garbage and dumping their sewage in the river.
Not all of it, like, they do some process, but what's left,
Okay.
they have a pipe that just goes up to the middle of the river, and they said it's a wide river, so they just put it in there.
Okay,
Mhm.
so they're
It's
allowed,
not direct pouring.
oh, okay, well, that's good.
Okay.
And they're allowed to burn their garbage, like in their landfill, like how we had before Christmas?
Well, it's
but
actually just
not
in a
the same?
building right downtown there, right by the
Oh.
railroad and stuff, and they burn it there, they have the incinerator.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, maybe we just needed an incinerator on ours.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
That was surprising.
I thought that was it.
Councillor Sharp.
Just a clarification, Quebec City is not the only city that burns garbage, and if it is burned at a proper temperature, it is safe, and they usually generate a form of heat, power, etc. So many cities in Canada do the same thing.
Interesting.
Okay. Moving on. Financial reports, we have none. Questions from media and public regarding items from this council meeting?
I'm good.
Yeah, I don't have any.
All right. Perfect. Thanks for coming to Coffee with Council.
Yes.
We
These
sure-
are the pictures I found on my camera.
I'll give you a really
That
good
was,
hint.
that was a rookie mistake leaving your camera on the table.
I didn't expect that.
All right. Can I get a motion, please? That
Mr. Mayor, I just
Yes.
just suggesting if there is need of a recess that it happens before the
Yes,
motion, as
okay,
we've been
we'll-
caught in that trap a few
we
times
will
lately.
recess for 5 minutes.
Perfect.
Just too warm.
Oh,
Okay, can I get a motion, please, that the meeting move into a closed session in accordance with sections 21(1)(b), 23(1)(a), and 27 of the FOIP Act? Councillor Chouinard will make that motion. Any questions, comments, or concerns? Hearing none, all those in favor? Motion carried. And can I get a motion, please, to accept the legal opinion received in camera as information?
Please make that.
Councillor Wilkinson will make that motion. All those in favor? Motion carried. Can I get a motion for adjournment? Councillor Chouinard. Non-debatable. All those in favor? Motion carried.